Dennis Hayes over here. Since some of these people haven't been to the past ones, maybe a quick introduction might be.
Oh, I'm Dennis
Is
Hayes.
that up in the upper right hand? Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I'm Dennis Hayes. I've been a woodworker for about 40 years and do it every day, having a lot of fun and enjoying this Monday night group. And I'll turn it over to my friend Ed.
Ed Rizzardi, been doing woodworking for 41 years.
He's a couple years older than I am.
Yeah. Started out at 12 years old at a junior high school and just been loving it for most of my life.
My name is Jom. I got into woodworking in college and I graduated Art Center in 2013, so not quite 40 years yet,
That's
but
about time.
working on it. Yeah. And I'm an artist, industrial designer, and woodworker.
And Jom was here. He worked all day in the shop on a rocking chair that he's developing. Going to be a lot of fun. Maybe in a month or so you'll have something to show the group.
Yep. So our standard disclaimer here is that we are everything that we have to say is basically our opinions, and you got 3 woodworkers that are really good at what they're doing here, and they probably have 15 different opinions on every last thing that we're talking about. So, which is kind of the point of us doing this, is so you guys everybody gets the different opinions and sees that there are different ways to do everything, and that's one of the great things about woodworking is there are a million ways to do things, and they're either all right or all wrong depending on who you talk to. So.
Well, yeah. That being said, Jom and I were talking earlier. What is it that we do? And I think what I do, and I lean towards, I do fine woodworking, and that's the broad category, broad thing. What I do, Jom, what is that? How would you define what we do? That fine woodworking.
Fine woodworking, I simply define as high quality woodworking. So, to me, high quality, like a good high quality finish. So, I mean, if you have like a chainsaw sculpture that has got that wow factor, but it's not really got a finish quality, I wouldn't necessarily call that fine woodworking. So, the finish quality for me has a lot to do with it.
How about you, Ed?
I would say that I would define fine woodworking as woodworking that's done precisely and accurately. And also design.
Yeah.
Good design, precisely and accurately, are what I would define fine woodworking.
I agree with both of them, and I'd only add to it that it's beautiful when you're done with it. So what we're going to talk about today, Ed put together some basic where you got to start in this fine woodworking, fine furniture making, and can you get the thing up and run it while I'm?
Yeah, I could do that.
And it really has to do with the accurate machining of the wood before you start making the stuff. I call it perfect. Ed calls it
Flat, straight, and square.
and just double click on that. Double click on that. There you go. And then Ed, you're going to talk over it as it goes, and if
Okay.
it slows up or whatever, you can just pause it. Click. Flat, straight, and square.
Okay, the thrust of the video is basically geared toward taking a piece of rough cut lumber, which generally isn't flat, straight, and square, and milling it to where it is flat, straight, and square. Now the beauty of the, in this shot here you can see that we've laid a square across it, and I believe that the next part of the video will show that we put it on a table saw and it's rocking, it's twisted. If you run that through your thickness planer, there's a high probability that you cannot get it flat, straight, and square. So there's a wind to it. I call it twisted, but you can see there that we're rocking it back and forth. So there's 3 basic tools that you need to use. There's others, but we'll talk about a jointer, a planer, and a table saw. So the first thing is to run one surface of the board across a jointer. Now this is a 12-inch jointer that I have in my shop. I've gone from a 6-inch to an 8-inch to a 12-inch, and that's a separate story. But you'll see here that we're going to move the fence over, make sure the fence is square. That's very important. Turned on the dust collector, and we're going to start to surf. Now I typically will take off about a 32nd of an inch at a pass. I can take off more, but you want to be concerned about the overall thickness of the wood when you finish, that you don't go beyond what you're looking for. We're looking for a piece of wood that's about 1 3/4 inches thick. This is 2 inches thick to start. I lowered it down a little bit, made another pass. It's still not cleaned up. I think I made 4 passes. And you can see there that it's real close, but on the back end there's still a corner of it that isn't completely surfaced yet. So we're going to take it and run it through one more time.
And what kind of wood is that?
That is sapelli from South Africa. It's in the mahogany family.
How was that compared to the walnut that we use?
Sapelli's a little bit softer. You're not going to get very much tear out, but they machine, it's in the hardwood family, but they machine about equally. The walnut, depending on the grain pattern, you might get a little tear out if your blades aren't good and sharp on your joiner or set properly.
That was a beautiful piece of wood that you donated for this.
Yeah, and Tom was mentioning that it's pretty common for guitars.
Sapelli backs and sides on guitars, yeah.
Oh, okay. I think we're going to finish up with one more pass here on the jointer, if I remember correctly. And all I'm doing is that I'm not worried about the edges or just one surface here to get it flat. This is all part of our flat, straight, and square concept. So you can see there I ran it through a little bit more slowly. And this side is, for all practical purposes, perfectly flat now.
So I was just wondering, not to cut you off,
Yep.
but so why do you do the flat part first and make one side? Or what's the?
Well, you have to surface one side of the board, so next step is to take it to the planer, and now you've got one side of the board that's perfectly flat, and then when you run it through your planer, you're going to have 2 parallel surfaces now. If you run a board through the planer that's twisted, cupped, warped, bowed, whatever, the planer will follow that curve. And you can keep running it through until you end up with a toothpick.
Can I
It
add
isn't going to work.
that I have tried this? I have been in the position where I didn't have a working joiner.
Yes,
I just had a really nice planer
yes,
and some really twisted acacia.
right.
So I thought maybe if I run it through and flip it enough, it'll even out. It will not. It just twists through the planer and comes out twisted. And then I thought, if I do it wrong some more, maybe I could fix it. So I thought maybe if I dominoed them together, that I could force the twist out and clamp them.
I wasn't going to get into this right now, but seeing he's talking about that, some people have made a sled for their thickness planer.
I did.
And you'll take and you can shim the corners where the board won't move, and then you run it through your planer now, and you'll get a flat surface. But the question is, what if you have a board that's 8 feet long? You're going to make an 8-foot sled to run it through?
I did.
God love you.
I
Okay. Well, it's
not as accurate. Even if you shim it right and you screw through the shim to make sure nothing moves, it's just too much. Yeah. Also, the sled is wood, the machine is metal. There's just too many margins for error. So
I love it.
So coming back to the joiner real quick, always ask yourself a question. What do I want to do with this joiner? If you want to make little short pieces that are 3 feet long, buy yourself a 6-inch wide joiner with maybe a 48-inch bed on it. The problem is if you're going to surface 8-foot boards with a little tiny joiner, you're going to, if it's got a big bow in it or a twist, it's going to fall off the end of the jointer, and you're not going to be able to get a flat surface like that. Now that joiner there is 80 inches long. So now if you're going to have a project and you've got an 8-foot board and each piece is going to be 2 feet, cut them into 2-foot lengths to begin with, and you'll eliminate a lot of that twisting and bowing and you'll make your life a lot easier than trying to run this great big board through there one time. So there's a few techniques to mitigate the inaccuracy of the jointing.
And to get back to your question about why the flat first, you're simply making the largest surface you can as a reference
Right.
surface.
Right.
That's all it is.
That's your starting point. Now you have one flat surface.
Okay.
So the next step in the operation is,
The next step.
Yeah, the next step.
the next step is to take it to the thickness planer now. Now the board right now, by getting that twist and everything out, started out at about 2 inches, but we really didn't take a lot off because we took corners off on one end and a little off the other end. So it's still well beyond the 1 3/4 inches that we're looking for.
Okay, it'll get there. There you go.
Actually, I
Thickness.
said it's a 3-step process. It's actually it's a
Or
4-step process. This is a 20-inch wide thickness planer, and we're basically just, you can see from the video there that we had to make 2 passes, and now I'm going to bring it down to my finished dimension, or a hair over my finished dimension. And now we're going to go to the joiner, and we're going to, now we got 2 flat surfaces, and we're running it across the joiner to get that 3rd edge on there. And then we're taking it over to the table saw, and we're going to cut it to the dimension that I'm looking for, which is 7 inches. Set up the fence, boom. So now we have, and the final step is flat, straight, and square. We're going to trim off each end of the board to the finished dimension, or we'll just clean it up. And now every surface on that board is flat, straight, and square, and there's about a 10-inch machinist square on there, and it's perfectly square.
That's where you got to start.
And parallel.
Parallel, flat, straight, square, and now Dennis asked me a question last week about, I ran it across the joiner, and then he said, why don't you put an edge on it now? The reason I do that is because of the grain. If you have figured material and you've got to run it across the joiner in the grain direction, otherwise you get tear out, I can't flip the board around where the grain's going in the right direction because that's the surface that hasn't been planed yet. So you want to start out with 2 parallel surfaces, then you can rotate the board, especially like on oak or something. If you don't run it with the grain, you'll get tear out because the blade's going against the grain. So you want to run it with the grain. So that's the only reason. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it. Any questions?
Okay, keep on trucking.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions so far with what we
Again, on
When
these
you
machines that I
initially
have.
Here's a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When you initially start to plane, like, how much do you take off for each pass?
In the planer,
Yeah,
typically about a 1/16 of an inch. The planer will take off more than that, but I found that I get the better cuts with taking a finer cuts. I'm not a production shop. I'm not in a big hurry to knock out 100 pieces of wood in an hour. So it's better to run it through. Now, if I take off too little, like 10/1000ths of an inch, because my machine has outfeed rollers that are metal, and they're knurled.
They leave that in.
They'll embed little marks in the board if you only take off a little tiny bit. So I've taken off a 1/4 of an inch, and it just doesn't do me any good to do that. It's just, I'm not in a hurry. So around a 1/16 of an inch or so, and you'll get, also you can creep up on it. You start taking off a 1/4 of an inch at a time, and you go, oh, I didn't mean to take off that much. So I use dial calipers, I check the measurement, and I have a digital readout on the thickness planer, and I can adjust it and get it as close to my finished dimension as I'm looking for.
Is that,
On to the
does that answer your question, or Michelle?
Now, one last question. If you don't buy into this concept, I had a friend bring over a mantle that he made for a lady, and it was twisted, bowed, the whole thing was jacked up because he didn't do this process. He bought dimensioned lumber from a lumber yard that was twisted. He tried to bend it and the whole top. And we literally had to run it across the jointer to get the top flat. So when you go to the lumber yard and pick out dimensioned lumber, which most lumber, look at the board and look if it's cupped or really seriously bowed or whatever, and ask yourself that I need that board to be 3/4 of an inch thick, and that's what I'm getting from the lumber yard. There's not much room to play with. So this process is geared for lumber that's in the rough, or if you just need to kiss off a board and take off a little tiny bit.
All right.
Yeah, I think this is impressive. Not my videography, but the actual.
Yeah.
Where there's no daylight. There's no daylight.
Yeah.
Now, just a word to the wise: don't ever buy a piece of equipment and think it's calibrated or straight, flat, and square. You got to check out your equipment, and that's why I put a scale or
This is the cool part.
oh yeah. There's my finished dimension, 1.772. It's 1.772 at that end.
That's 1.5.
No,
You're like
1.771,
One
a thousandths of an inch off.
no 0.5. I
Yeah.
don't even
Okay.
can't even think that small.
And then we're going to go over and show you the digital readout on the thickness planer, and it's 1.771.
No, I know why that's off. I'll tell you after the video. You'll
Did you walk by it or something? And
no, actually,
the battery, I had to change the battery. My battery was going dead on the digital readout, and it jumped about 20,000.
when you we'll continue next time.
Next time,
Go ahead.
oh, forgot about this one.
I didn't show.
Hello, Michelle, here we go. Next time, we're going to do a demonstration on using the Keller dovetail fixtures.
Mm.
Yep.
How many are interested in that? Hey!
Yeah, it should be pretty good. So for today, though, now we want to, I think, go a little more in depth on the subject for today, that making your board perfect, and why, and how, and any other things.
We got to do more.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I gotta.
Yep.
In the video, if you were, I did the video. Kevin, scroll back in the video to where he's running it through the thickness planer, and you'll see when you crank. Okay, on the
Yeah, a little more.
right there, and when you walk away, the wheel actually turns. Right. Yeah, just watch this for a second. Now watch to the left. As you walk away, the adjusting wheel actually rotates a little bit. See, watch it now. See where your hand is? See, it goes up there, and see how it drops back down?
It dropped back down. Yeah.
And that's where your thousands
Oh.
of, or whatever.
Yeah, one thing I don't do is there are 4 lockdown screws
Frictions, yeah.
on the planer, and I've never had to lock them down before I run a board through there. I've just never had a problem with that.
And a thousandth, if that's how you pronounce it. So anyway, yeah, kind of an interesting. Okay, the first time I decided I was going to be a woodworker, I decided I wanted to work with walnut, so I called up the local walnut store, and I said, I'd like to buy some walnut, and the guy said, okay, what do you want? I said, walnut. He said, well, what kind? Well, the kind that grows from walnut trees.
We actually do have a couple more questions.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So let me
Yeah, well,
find out where they are. Okay, so there was that one about how much do you take off, and similar to Michelle's question, so how exact to the 1.5 inch or whatever you're trying to get to do you actually take it to? would be the question.
I take it to within a thousandth of an inch. And I know that that's not practical for most people. That's the way I work. That's a personal thing. Some people might be happy with plus or minus a 1/16 of an inch. I try to do my joinery where it fits perfectly. Now, it's just a personal thing. It's
And-
what
yeah.
it's what's inside you, what you're happy with or what you're willing to live with. And if you're not happy with the results of what you're getting, step up your game and make it happen.
Do better.
That's all.
I would say that if I want 1.5 inches, I make every effort to get 1.5 inch piece of wood. But I also know if I can control that 1.5 inches now on the machine, which is fairly easy, I try to be as accurate as I can on everything, knowing full well that as we go along the process of making, there is an accumulative error.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, if you do it for a while, the errors kind of cancel out. I don't know if that makes sense, but do it as best you can. Understand that there may be an accumulative error that you're going to have to deal with at the end of the project or throw the piece away. So, you know, I'm a little less stringent, but I strive for the accuracy because I know I'm going to screw up somewhere else. And the better I do, the more I think about it, it's usually the product is a little bit better.
Well,
Do you, like I plane all my boards at the same time so I know they're the same thickness? Do you do that, or are you like probably so experienced you don't have to?
no, like, well, I'll give you an example. Making a tabletop. Let's say I was going to make a dining room table that's 3 feet wide. I would plane all the boards exactly the same thickness, and then domino them or biscuit joint them and glue them up and everything. And by doing that, it reduces the amount of sanding time tremendously and the accuracy again of your tabletop, because every piece is uniformly dimensioned. And if you've got a decent joinery where you don't have any mismatch, your project again comes out flat, straight, and square again. So, but I'll give you another quick example. You say machine everything all at one time. If I were making a desk, I would do the tabletop, then I'd do the sides. But the drawers, the drawing might call for 10-inch wide drawers. But after I get done measuring them, they're 10 1/8. But if I cut every piece to the drawing and I didn't put it together exactly perfect, then I've wasted, all my pieces are 10-inch, they're 1/8 of an inch too
Yeah,
small.
that accumulative error, that's where it might
Accumulative error. And so you just want to kind of think through the project and take one step at a time. If the drawing said, well, to make, you know, like I said, don't go get ahead of yourself and start cutting everything out exactly perfect, because it's okay to be on the high side. Always trim off. But if you're on your low side, nobody likes a drawer that's 1/4 of an inch slop in it, you know. Okay. Good question, Michelle.
Yeah. So,
I'm curious. I used mesquite, harvest mesquite, and have it, and then mill it. And mesquite, you can't find the direction of the fruit without chip. It's over 3 foot long anyway. The grain runs every which way,
Yeah.
from one end to the other. And so you can plane it down, but you've got to take it and put it on a drum sander to get it smooth. There's no way to keep it from chipping with the grain going every which way. Have you run it?
Well, yes.
Into that with it?
Tear out, as far as I'm concerned, is a result of the quality of your planer or joiner. To a certain degree, I'd say 95%. I've had 3 thickness planers. 2 of them had conventional knives, and now
I do
I
not
have
have
one
the
with a
spiral.
spiral
That
cutting head.
Spiral type head.
And I just
would probably
hardly have
hurt
any
it that
tear
much
out on
more.
it.
yeah, you're kind of breaking up a little bit, and I'm.
Do you
Yeah.
have major tear out?
Yeah.
What happened?
Is it us?
You say like mesquite, the bird's eye maple, and curly maple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Limits the tear out. It really eliminates it. With the
How many carbide blades does that have on it?
It's something like 60 blades.
You had one.
Man.
60? No, it's more than that. Depending on the size of your head.
Right.
My planer, I've only got a 12-inch planer, but that's got a hell of a big, man. I can't even think of how many there are.
I use a lot of carbide tools for wood turning. Those suckers are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Are you able to twist them around? Are they bladed? Are they sharp on all four
Usually
sides
not.
where you can
they're
twist
sharp
them?
on all four sides, and
Yeah.
as you wear them down, they're carbide too.
Yeah.
So when you wear one side, you just shift it 90 degrees. You've got actually 4 blades on one actual blade.
Yeah.
And I just got a one for my general, my 8-inch general jointer, and I'm going to be installing that next week.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But it's really worth it. I've got one on my 6-inch jointer, and that thing, it's so quiet.
Yeah.
Just the noise alone, it makes it extremely quiet.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an
And it's,
example.
got me drooling, you know.
it's like dust. It doesn't clog up the dust collection
Yeah.
tube. It's made a major change for me.
I've had my
And
planer
the word
for,
doesn't seem to be out about those either. I know they exist, and I hadn't even thought about it when I asked the question. But at the time that I was building these, the vanity and my top part, I was so disappointed. It was chipped up so bad. The boards were 6 foot long. And but I had a friend that had a drum sander. We took it over there and smoothed it out, and everything turned out okay.
okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know anybody that has a planer with the carbides.
Yeah, well, it is. You don't have to use a drum sander anymore. That's the major thing.
I agree with you almost 100%.
It's really weird because we were talking about this 2 or 3 months ago,
Yeah.
and I have a piece up at the house. So I'll get it next week if we. But I asked Ed. I said, well, do you really need to run after you run your wood through your wonderful thickness planer? Do you really need to run through the sanding machine? And so he ran a piece through his machine through the carbide bladed thickness planer, both sides, and then he ran one side through the sander. You didn't really have to do the sanding machine, except in the 1 inch there was a little bit of snipe off of the thickness planer
Very minor.
that you could sand out with 120 on a hand sander in 3 seconds.
One thing about the carbide, I've got the general, but mine are half inch wide, inch long. They're only sharp on 2 sides. I rotated them after 6 years, and I probably really didn't have to do that either. But I have a lot of curly maple that I hardly get any tear out anymore. The straight knife one, I had problems with.
Yeah.
Right.
And in my role as the odd man out, I have high-speed steel, a 10 1/4 inch planer, high-speed steel. I only run really good walnut. Jom runs pine through it once in a while. I have not sharpened the blades probably in 3 years.
Wow.
And it, you know, I wouldn't recommend it, but it's just I need it. 10 1/4 is all I need.
Well, here's another question that I wasn't aware of until about 5 or 6 years ago. I went down to Harbor Freight and I bought a very inexpensive thickness planer, and I used it. I thought I was going to use it just to run rough lumber through because God knows there's stones in it or whatever. I get 19,000 cuts per minute with that planer, and the pieces come off like glass. I think the question to ask with these other planers is how many cuts a minute are you getting? If you're only getting 2 cuts a minute, it's going to go ka-chunk, ka-chunk, it's going to chew your wood up. But if it's close to 15 to 20,000 cuts per, the machine runs at 9,000 RPM.
Yeah.
So it's 18,000 cuts per minute. And they come off like glass. And it's a $179 planer. Now, I don't know what the DeWalt or any of these other smaller planers run at, but that's an interest. I'm going to look into it and look at the specs, and I'll report back next week.
I think one of the big questions is, what do you do if you don't have a joiner or a planer, and how do you what's the best way to deal with that?
Okay.
Or basically, I guess it depends at what point should you get one, right? If you don't have one.
If you strive to make fine furniture, that's why we kind of defined it at the onset. If that's your goal, you really have to have a planer, a joiner, and a thickness planer. You know, you can hand plane and all that kind of stuff. There may be some other workarounds, but those, you know, if you're going to do fine woodworking, you pretty much have to make the wood perfectly flat, perfectly straight, and perfectly square. By whatever method you can do that. If you know, 94 degrees is not good enough. If you can do it with a hand plane, God bless you. If you can do all that, if you can make it perfectly flat with a hand plane,
it's really worth the investment, because you'll spend hours, days just making your wood smaller and smaller, but not quite perfect.
And I have to say, I have to confess that I have done it. I have flattened boards by hand with I got the old plane in the cupboard right now. I look at it and think, my God, I'm glad I have my electric stuff. But if you strive to make what Ed makes, you have to have those three components, in my humble opinion, and they have to be set up as well as you can, and then you have to work to develop to make them get perfect cuts out of it. You know, that's the unfortunate truth. That I wanted to make furniture. I hand saw and stuff until I got my saws and my planer and joiner. I was kidding myself. So I know everybody wants the simple answer. No, you don't have to spend. You can go and buy something cheap. You could buy an inexpensive used joiner, and if you work on it enough to get it to where it works perfectly, yeah, you could do that. Yeah. But you got to have a planer. How are we doing? Yeah, I would like to get. I started, you know, when I first decided to buy some walnut and stuff, and I called the lumber yard, and the guy was pretty. He wasn't a very good representative of the Hardwood Association guy, and he basically told me, he says, well, call me back when you know what's going on in the woodworking world. And it really struck me. So I have made it an effort. We buy wood in rough wood in quarters. We buy 4-quarter, 8-quarter, 6-quarter, 5-quarter.
Right.
And there, if you want to know, we buy a lot of hardwood from Peterman Lumber in Fontana, and there's always this question of grade and quality. Is FAS better than #1 Common? No, it's exactly the same wood. It's just the amount of wood you can get out of a stick. If you really want to understand about how to buy hardwood like what we buy, go to the AmericanHardwood.org, and they will tell you exactly how they grade the wood, mostly American species. And if you have questions on the structural amount, the structural capabilities of wood, the wood database, just Google wood database, and they have everything from Jinka hardness to modulus of
elongation and tensile strength.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff we kind of intuitively know it, but there is huge amounts of data on the internet that you can get. The AmericanHardwood.org, you can actually download their deal and make sure you can understand what it is you're buying.
Well, when you buy your wood, do you get select or better?
Okay, that
I don't get #1 or common.
Okay, FAS is first and seconds, #1 common, #2 common, etc., etc.
Right.
If you have a number 2 common and FAS board, you cut out a piece that's 3 inches by 3 feet, and you take the number 1 common, the same size, it's exactly the same wood. It's just out of the FAS board, you can get longer and wider cuts out of it without defects.
Right, more usable wood, right.
You can get more square footage of clear wood. And
Right.
go to the AmericanHardwood.org and you'll see it's fascinating because they'll have a 6-foot board and say this is FAS, and then they'll show how they can cut it, and then they have a 6-foot or 8-foot number 1 common board, and they block out the usable wood in it, and then there's 87.5% minimum, or you can buy a board, and if it's number 1 common, I think it's 87% of the board has to be usable. I mean, it's crazy, the detail that they have it worked out to. It's to our benefit to know that stuff, especially when you're making money, to know what you're buying. No need to buy FAS if you're making 3-foot boxes. You can get the same quality of wood by a number 2 common. In fact, when I first started, I'd only buy number 2 common. So that's my, I want to know everything there is to know, and it's on the internet now.
Yep.
It took me a long time to figure all this other stuff out before the internet. Okay?
Yeah. So there's some new people, I think, the first time here. Ryan, do you have any comments, or what do you think of our workshop here?
It's really good. I'm enjoying it. So I'm pretty much a newbie. My wife actually forwarded me the link to sign up for the videos. So I mean, I don't want to take up all your time, but short story is that I do drywall finish, painting, and some staining for work. So I'm a little bit familiar with woodworking and carpentry. And then my oldest son is 18, and he's taken like building trades all 4 years of high school. So we kind of wanted to get into it as a hobby and see where it goes from there. So we have some basic tools, and we are like step 1. But I figure the more I surround myself with smart people, maybe some of it will sink in.
I don't know about smart, but we are dedicated.
Yeah, dedicated. They definitely know what they're doing here. So,
and just real quick, I was a furniture maker. I started as a furniture maker. I built, to make a living. I made cabinets and got into construction, and I had a career as in big construction. So it all relates. So
yeah. So do you do woodworking for a living now?
I'm retired. Ed and I both did it for a living for a couple years. But we live in an odd area. We live in the backyard of one of the world's most famous woodworker, and it was really difficult for a couple of young guys to get a foothold. But we've done it. We have done it all of our lives, but we did have careers in other industries.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you putting it out into the world for free, and I definitely enjoyed it. I'll be back for sure.
Okay. And
Ryan, where are you from?
I'm in central Illinois,
Oh,
kind of between St. Louis and Springfield.
Okay. It's so wonderful to have everybody from around the country. I love it.
yeah, definitely.
well, seeing you're just starting out, don't hesitate to ask any questions about tools or what to buy or whatever. It's painful to buy the wrong thing, trust me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One question I did have, like I've picked up some used stuff. I'm kind of a DeWalt guy on Facebook, like planers and saws and stuff. And you mentioned Harbor Freight, like just from kind of some YouTube videos, it doesn't seem like that would be like the greatest.
Well,
Almost better to buy like high-end used.
let me clarify that for you. I would
Okay.
never recommend anybody buy power tools from Harbor Freight. The only
Okay.
reason I bought that planer is a lot of the wood in the rough, you don't know if it's got stones in it, and I don't want to run it across my jointer, so pardon my French, but I bought it as my shit wood planer, okay? That's what it was gonna be.
But
it
it's
turned out to be a diamond in the rough, that's all.
Yeah.
Now, if you
Okay.
go on to Amazon or a number of different websites, you'll see that same planer. They're up to about $500 for them now, but they come out of the same factory in Taiwan or China. One's
Okay.
green, one's blue, one's yellow, and one's pink. They're all the same. And the prices have gone up on this stuff quite a bit. But I'll give you an example. I bought a Sawzall from Harbor Freight, and the switch broke in 5 minutes.
I
yeah.
had a Sawzall from Harbor Freight that I only intended to use once,
That's all you got.
and it still works for some reason.
Because you only used it once.
No, I use it. I use it all the time.
Oh,
I
what?
have a good Sawzall and my Chicago Electric. You get lucky every now and then,
Yeah.
but don't
Chicago
go.
Yeah.
Automatic, I think. Yeah. No, but buy cheap, buy twice. Buy good, buy once.
Okay.
And just ask yourself this one question. We keep bringing this up.
What do you wanna
Where
do?
do you want to go with
Yeah.
this? Do you guys want to make really fine furniture? Don't go to Harbor Freight. Okay. And the other thing about Harbor Freight, their tools aren't cheap anymore.
Oh, okay.
They've changed the name. Some of their stuff looks like Milwaukee now. And,
Oh.
you know, their drill motors and stuff are like $150 now.
Oh, wow.
You know,
And are they precise?
I don't know because I don't buy tools.
Yeah.
I buy gloves. I buy rags. That's what I buy at Harbor Freight.
Okay.
Ask us get our opinion. We've been doing this for so long. We've had all different brands. DeWalt's a good brand. You know, they're in the Porter Cable family and all that stuff. And there's Milwaukee, Porter Cable, DeWalt. There's a number of good brands.
Yeah, and we like what works.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say how many routers Ed's got, but they're all Milwaukees, and I've got several Milwaukee routers. They just are perfect.
I had a
And-
bunch of crappy routers when I met Dennis, and now I only use Milwaukee.
Yeah, because they work,
Good.
and they're just, you know, you can get them online for really inexpensive.
Well, I'm not promoting this because you got to know what you're looking at. eBay. You go in there and type in Milwaukee router or Keller dovetail fixture, whatever you want to do. There's a bunch of them in there. And you got to look at the price and the shipping and everything, but look, you got to blow up the pictures because they'll say, oh, used one time. Looks like the guy ran over it with a truck, okay? And there's no guarantee.
Well, they're probably telling the truth, though, right?
Yeah, it's only used
Yeah,
one
he only
time.
ran over it once with his truck, yeah.
Used one time on that rough
But
wood
you'd
with the
be-
stones in it.
You know, like the little Milwaukee cordless trim routers now.
Okay.
They're going for about $200 new. You can get them on eBay for about $110, $120 or something. And,
Okay.
you know, so don't be afraid to look there as a source, but I've had good luck with it. I've never bought anything, except I did have one, that the guy gave me my money back. I turned on the router and it just started whining, and I said, hey pal, this wasn't as advertised, okay?
Yeah.
But that's only one, so.
Out of 100,
Yeah, but sometimes you gotta move fast, as we used to say. You can't go on eBay and look
right.
at something and go, well, I'll come back in 3 weeks. It'll be gone. So.
Right.
yeah, because if it's a good
Okay.
price, Ed will buy it, right?
Yeah, and then other times, you know, there's a guy selling a set of dovetail fixtures from Keller that retail from Keller for $469. He's got them on there for $700.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know, they're preying on the poor guy that to go, oh my God, 700, I gotta buy this right away, you know. So you gotta know what you're looking at, but,
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah,
ask
I'm
us.
just trying to-
Yeah,
get a hold of Kevin or something or whatever, and we'll lead you in the right direction.
Yep.
Okay.
as best we
Awesome.
can,
As best, because that's our opinion.
in our opinion.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I
Hey,
appreciate
Oh,
it.
yeah.
glad you made it. Make something beautiful.
All
And thank your
right.
wife.
Oh, here's another thing, real quick. A lot of guys hesitate to buy good clamps. Okay, Dennis and I have a bunch of Bessie clamps. I don't know if you can see them on the wall back there.
Uh-huh.
If you bought one clamp a week, okay, just one, in a week you'll have 52 clamps. A lot of guys says, well, I can't afford to go out and buy 20 clamps right now. Just buy
One
buy
at a
one or two.
time.
And then next week, when you're driving by Home Depot, pick up another one for $30. $30
Right.
getting buy a hamburger and a thing of,
Yeah, we got the breakfast and it's twice that.
Before I met you guys, I bought a bunch of clamps on Amazon, cheap clamps. I could
Yep.
afford to buy them all at once, and within a week I had no clamps.
They all broke.
They all broke.
Yes.
Buy cheap,
Yeah.
buy twice. I'm telling you. Unless you're, here's another thing. If you're going to do a project and you're going to need a clamp to do one time in your whole life, buy the cheap one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
But we're in this. I've logged in over 55,000 hours of woodworking,
And he keeps track.
and I keep tracking it. And
Seriously.
And when I started, I bought a lot of cheap tools. And it's a long story, but I threw the brakes on that after about 2 years. I said, I can't do this anymore. Because
Right.
I wanted, the more you step up the game, if you want to sell your stuff, you can get more money for it. You want to make dog houses or picnic tables? Yeah, you'll sell them for $50. But if you want to sell high-end, fine furniture, you've got to invest in it. And you'll reap the reward of it. It'll come back where you go, man, I just sold a table for $5,000. Okay?
Yeah.
But you're not
Yeah.
going to sell a table for $5,000 that looks like a piece of crap. You're not going to do
Right.
it. That clientele is not going to buy a junky table. Maybe for their backyard, they'll give you $50 for it. Where do you
Yeah.
want to go with it?
Okay.
Okay?
For the
Think
advice.
about it.
I've
Just
learned that
give
along
it
the
some
way.
deep thought. And
You do. It pays to invest in a good tool. You'll have it the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Whereas, like repeatedly buying a piece of junk from Harbor Freight.
exactly.
Or I have a mixer I use for drywall. That was my first one. It's a Black & Decker. And I keep praying for that thing to die. But it just
Get a
keeps
good one.
running
Well-
and running and running.
Yeah,
Well, that's when Black &
Yeah.
Decker made good stuff.
I've gotten to the point where I try and invest in
Yeah.
good things.
Yeah.
Even if it's just every so often. And cheaper things do have their place, for sure, for certain projects. But
Right.
overall, I try and invest in stuff that's going to last.
Do you know how many Milwaukee routers I've sent in for repair?
How many?
Zero. None.
Okay.
Never.
Well,
And
well,
I'm
that was
not
my
I'm not
next
praying they
one.
die either.
Yeah. That's
No.
the next one I've been shopping for, so that's really good
yeah.
to know.
By Milwaukee, a half inch, no question.
Yeah. and-
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Any others?
Machinery. As far as machinery goes, you look on Facebook Marketplace,
Yeah.
and there's another one too that I was Craigslist.
Craigslist, yeah.
Don't be afraid to get a
Yeah.
table saw
Okay.
that has rust on it. I totally took mine apart, got rid of the rust, rebuilt the whole thing, and
Uh-huh.
it cost me nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's what? It's worth. I could sell it now for a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
I only
Yeah.
picked it up for $200.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as long as you could take it apart and rebuild it, do that.
And-
You'll save a lot of money.
On that same thought, you take it apart and you build it, and you understand the machine and you can make it perfectly accurate. That's the key.
I got a question. You know, I have a lot of the Bessie clamps too, but yeah, dang it, them little red things keep popping off all the time.
Uh-huh.
You know, I've got the ones where, you know, you one-handed ones, you know, and then that darn red thing. Well, then I had the ones with the round, I forget which, Bessie Juniors, I don't know. And then the doggone red thing popped off and I can't find it.
Yeah.
I'm like, should I super glue them on or what?
Epoxy.
Call Bessie Clamps and tell them. Did you buy them from Rockler?
Yes.
Call Rockler and say, hey, I'm really unhappy with my clamps. They keep breaking, or they, you know, I'd call our Rockler. I know you've had some good interactions. I mean, they want to know, and Bessie wants to know if there is a problem with their products. Again, don't be afraid to call Rockler or Bessie. In fact, we really want people, if there's a problem, to take that step to call them, and because you're helping us.
Yeah, those are the clamps, not like yours, but like those orange ones with the little rubber tip that slides on.
Yeah.
I glue
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I glue mine.
What do you put, epoxy or super glue? I'd recommend epoxy.
I epoxied it.
Yeah.
I've also used a softer wood, but if your clamps have a little silicone, it's easier for the glue to peel off. And if you use wood, you can just sand it off. Either way works. If you can't find the rubber boot, just get a little piece of wood.
All right, well, our time is almost at an end for today. Actually, we have a new arrival here. Trevor, you want to say hi?
Trevor Grant? Oh, I shouldn't say his name. Trevor. Is that Trevor?
I think he's on mute.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Which one? Is he the one on the bottom?
Yeah, just.
I don't-
I have a couple of friends come over on Saturday mornings, and I think that
Yep,
is
that's
that
Trevor.
Hey, glad you made it, Trevor. So anyway,
Yep.
if you happen to be in Southern California, give me a call or give me whatever. As long as we don't have 50 people. But,
All right. So like I said, everyone, thanks for showing up today, and if you